Hey, 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 hey. Hey, YouTube. Hey, Facebook. Hey, Instagram. No. Mommy's not playing with you. Louie will not be on camera tonight. Louie is on punishment. Louie is a bad dog. He looked to the side. Hey, Kevin. He looked to the side like, who, me? Yeah, you. Okay. Hey, Antoine. How you doing? Hey, Anthony. Hey, YouTube. Hey, Instagram. Hey, Tyrone. Hey, Facebook. Okay, so there's no Periscope tonight. I got to get another device so I can do Periscope. Okay, so this is Little Pro. Hey, Daryl. This is Little Pro Education Group, and I'm the lead consultant, Randa. And tonight's question for Woke Wednesdays, where we go deep into history. Hey, Monica. And we siphon out the historical problems that give way to the contemporary problems today. And so we have a hashtag. I typically don't put the hashtags on Facebook. I have to start. But one of the hashtags is, it's not your child's fault. Another hashtag is, it's not your fault. Hey, Michael. Another hashtag we have is systematic, right? And so two of the texts that I really rely on, or one of the two texts during this series that I rely on, is the Miseducation of the Negro. And as I said before, that this book goes beyond Black people, because this is post-colonial education, right? And so after Europeans invaded various societies and cultures throughout the world, that European dominated education has been infiltrated into the minds, the subconscious and the conscious of its subjects. And those are various people. So when those people come to the United States, they already have been educated with that white dominance, right? So a lot of things that we talk about go across racial and ethnic lines. And so tonight's question is, my mind just skipped, sorry, is was desegregation good for students of color? So I gotta make an announcement. I messed up. Yeah. So when I sent out all of the questions to all of the platforms, I put was, hey Trip. I put hey Almari, welcome. I didn't see you. I put, was desegregation good for communities of color? And I was thinking education, but I didn't put it in there. So a lot of the feedback that we got from various people is basically more talking about desegregation in general, talking about communities and neighborhoods. Hold on, Louie, go sit down. Go. He's in the doghouse, so don't mind me. I don't want to hear him playing and having no fun. Hey, Tamara. Hey, Rochelle. Hey, Lester. Hey. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, because of that, I'm going to go ahead and we'll discuss what people have said about desegregation in general, and then we'll get to it specifically in terms of education. Hey, Alaric. Back. Okay, from Snapchat, I'm going to tell you, thanks, honey. I'm going to tell you, Snapchat be going in. Hey, Humble. Snapchat be going in on these questions. They be taking them. They be eating them up. Facebook is a little on it. What's up, Mike? Okay, so Legendary. That was a commercial. Okay, so Legendary on Snapchat said bad, and he didn't elaborate. Okay. Ariana said good. It may have been hard for people during that time, like Little Rock 9, so basically the 1960s, but it was the diversity needed. So basically Ariana is saying that it adds to the diversity of neighborhoods, it adds to the diversity of schools, because don't forget in the 60s and 70s, you had neighborhood schools, right? You know, people walked to schools. We didn't have all of these buses. Hey, cuz, hey, JoJo. So that it added the diversity. It keeps freezing. Am I okay now? Hey, Charmaine. Am I okay now? Somebody thumbs up if I'm okay now. Let me see if I'm on the Wi-Fi. Yeah, I'm on the Wi-Fi. Okay. Hey, am I okay now? That is true. That it did add to. Okay, Bandwaya said desegregation actually did more harm than good financially. If it was separate and equal, things would have been fine. So basically, but Brandwaya, I think my connection is bad off because it just said that on Instagram, is saying that in terms of financial institutions and neighborhoods, hey Jason, where blacks were doctors, there were lawyers, of course, there were secretaries, there were dentists, there were restaurant owners, there were hairdressers prior to desegregation. And financially, all of those business elements basically dismantled. Hi, Brittany. Because now your population, now that they can move into the ritzier neighborhoods or neighborhoods that were closer to town or whatever, wherever their work is, they have the ability to be able to move. But then you pull those financial resources, you pull those intellectual talents, you pull those people who specialize in certain services out of those neighborhoods, right? And so that tax rate goes down. You're not collecting taxes for your community off of those high earning incomes, right? And so your children aren't being educated with their children, so forth and so on. So he's absolutely right. In terms of financially, it did good. But again, we're going to focus on education in a second. Okay, Jason, who is from the UK, and again, post-colonial, a lot of these things happen around the world. The United States have some, are going to have some differences, but there are some general connections that can be drawn. So Jason says, tough one, but I'm going with good. Segregation isn't the issue. Education of all is. That and belief and knowledge of our great and noble history. He confused me because his answer, hey Nikki, his answer and his response don't match up. So I don't know if there's a typo or something, or a misunderstanding on his part or my part. But I'm going to stick with his actual thought out response, and that's education for all. Segregation is not the issue. Education, I think it should say for all is. That and belief and knowledge in our great and noble history. So in other words, It doesn't matter who ethnically is in a neighborhood, whether it is a Chinese neighborhood, whether it is a Latino neighborhood, whether it is a Black neighborhood. If everybody had equal education, equal funding, equal resources, then segregation is not an issue at all. And I agree with that. Okay. And he did get straight to the educational component. Yay, Jason. Okay, your sweet son, excuse me, said kind of both. Because a divide, I don't know what that music is. What? Yeah, I changed it. Okay, because a divide to other races and within our own community. Cause a divide to other races and within our own community, where no one wants to help, or if we do, is limited, so the other person can never be better than or achieve more than the next. Everything is a competition instead of working together as a unit. We would be powerful as a whole. Hey, Tom. Hey, David. Okay, I'm not sure. Oh. Okay, I think what your sweet son is saying is, and I'm not sure because she says kind of both, but she doesn't explain the pros and the cons. She focused on the cons where no one wants to help. And so I'm not sure exactly where she's coming from, but okay. Okay, Angela says, you have toddler advice. I think it was bad for them, just a way to knock them down legally, but it's 2019 for exclamation points. She doesn't go into detail about what she means by how to knock them down legally. But I know some insight in terms of what it could mean, but I'm not sure what she means. Okay, Ed says, I personally think it was good. For me in high school, I lived in a 97% Black community, but I was bused to a school miles away that were mostly white. Go sit down. Go. Louie's in the doghouse, so don't mind me. Hey, KK. Hey, Marissa. Although there was a high school closer that was mostly Black, but you had to have a certain GPA to attend. Me obtaining that GPA was no problem. I chose not to attend that school because I knew a lot of kids there, and it was all about who wore the best clothes and shoes. The education was poor or not as good as the other schools, but was happy with the school I was at. My grades never slipped, and truly it felt good going to a school that was fairly new and not ran down. While there, I excelled in sports, which may have happened at the other school. It opened my eyes and exposed me to more. Okay, we're going to get into this one. This is the one we're going to get into. Thank you, Ed. Yo. Hey, James. Hey, Dawn. Ed came through. My bad. I didn't add education students to the question, but he got right deep into it. Okay, so we're going to really dissect and break down his answer and really expose the truth behind the historical parts of desegregation and the contemporary issues. So Ed is probably like in his 30s or 40s. So he's probably he's either late generation X or early millennial, depending on his age. Okay, so he says desegregation was good. In high school, he lived in a 97% Black community, but he was bused to a school miles away that was mostly white. Although there was a high school closer that was mostly Black, but you had to have a certain GPA to attend. Me attaining that GPA was no problem. I chose not to attend that school because I knew a lot of kids were there and it was all about who wore the best clothes and shoes. Okay, so let's break that down. Typically, in the process of desegregating schools, it was not the white kids who had to get up earlier and be bused and endure that stigma. It was not the white kids who were asking to go into another neighborhood, into another school. It was kids of color. And in this example, a Black kid. And now that Black kid is an adult, and in their adult mind, they still see nothing wrong with it. Right? Yet and still, it is white dominance. Maybe not those individuals in that school in particular during that particular era, but previous generations of whites who made this system possible, from segregation to desegregation, right? And so there's a mentality that's there, that's brought on by our history books, our literature, in terms of what they're choosing to expose people to, the media, and how it informs our conscious and subconscious mind, and how we think about ourselves and each other. Now, he's in the South, and I am quite sure that there were some negatives at the white school, and he doesn't even talk about them, right? And so this is a part of the bad thing that happens. It feeds into that negativity, that self-hate concept. And I don't want to say self-hate in the most extreme form, like there is absolutely positively no love for yourself. But the way in which you view yourself and each other in the paradigm of white dominance, right? I needed to go to the white school in order to excel. Notice that he did not even realize that he was saying that he was academically talented. He could obtain the GPA to get into a closer high school, but he took his academic brilliance and he brought it to a predominantly white school instead of using it in a predominantly Black school, right? And so that's another issue with desegregation. Taking away the talent in the classroom of Black neighborhoods. Making these kids get on buses and go into the white neighborhoods. Do you know the stigma that's attached to that? And studies have been done and shown teachers do not treat bused kids the same. And as a grown man, he can't even pick up on that. Teachers do not treat bused kids the same because there's a stigma and a history to busing. Blacks are inferior. They're invading our neighborhoods and our schools. And this school has gone down. Hey, Rich, since the infiltration of people of color since desegregation. They are saying that today in 2019, teachers my age and older who remembers when the school was all white. Teachers my age and older who remember when it was only a trickling of students and things were still great. Teachers my age and older who remembers when the populations started to, the people of color population started to increase significantly. And with that increase over time, so has society changed in general. During that time period, you had a high infiltration of drugs in various communities, right? And so what impact has that had on society and student preparedness? All students, right? But when they talk about the deterioration of public schools, they're talking about the Black kids, the Latino kids, the poor kids. And I'm not using that synonymously because you can have a Black kid who's middle class that they're talking about, and you can have a white kid that's lower economic class that they're talking about, right? And it's so funny that in today, hey Curtis, that some people can't pick this up, right? All right. Then he says he's speaking so down about the Black schools, but he's not looking at the systemic nature of it. So I knew a lot of kids there talking about the Black school, and it was all about who wore the best clothes and shoes. Okay, so that's historical. Hey, Alvin, that's historical. When Gabby Douglas was in the Olympics a few years back, and her hair was not done in a way in which Black people deemed acceptable. It's not that her hair was in its natural state, because by then people were wearing their hair natural and not saying a word. But her hair wasn't styled, right? Hey, Sam, her hair wasn't styled. And then when the camera shot to her family's hair was like on point. It was like done up, right? And then she's with these other gymnasts of other races, and their hair is done. And so that whole backlash, and I'm sure there's people who were self-hating online, people of color, in particular Black people who were hating on the texture of her hair. But I saw it differently, right? So Blacks, because so much has been taken from us historically, especially during the enslavement era, that on Sundays when it's church time, you dress in your Sunday best, because during the week, you probably had a job in which you could not do that. So you showed out on Sunday. When there's an event, you wear your best. You show out, right? And so as a teacher, anytime we had events, co-curricular or extracurricular events, they would automatically, meaning the students, will automatically start talking about what they're going to wear, because they want to be presentable. They want to show out. This is historical. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you have a particular, when you have a particular mentality, where you look at Black people underneath the microscope, and everything that we say or do is inferior, you have this ingraining, right? So this school that he went to is more than likely not vested in his total education of self. it's evident as a grown man, he can't even circumvent the teachings. He can't even see how he was brainwashed to be anti him, right? You don't know that that's what we do. You don't know where that comes from. You don't know that there's nothing wrong with that. Hey, Christina, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? The education was poor or not as good as the other schools. Okay, and again, so he's not looking at the systemic part. Hey, Tawana, the schools are not good because they've been historically underfunded. The funding, and in some communities, the funding was taken from the Black communities and put in white communities, right? So let's use Bridgeport, Connecticut for an example. Lowest funded school system for many years in the state of Connecticut, but it's in the richest county in the country. No, we're not friends right now. You need to go. Told you, I'm not playing with Louis today. I'm not playing with Louis today. When I'm mad, he gonna know mommy mad. So, hey Eddie, lowest funded school in the state of Connecticut. State of Connecticut is per capita the richest state in the country, and Bridgeport is in the richest county in the country. The people who live in the more affluent part of Fairfield County actually stole the resources over the years from Bridgeport. The highway system, the water piping system, all these different infrastructures in order to build up their communities, and they never paid Bridgeport for it. And those residents who were high paid in the city ended up leaving and going to those suburban communities. So now their tax dollars are being taken from Bridgeport and at its maximum and put into the suburban communities. And so Bridgeport is going down, 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 and is the lowest funded. So depending on the history of the communities in which he's talking about, there could be something that's similar. But definitely in general, Black schools do not get the same funding and resources historically. So again, he's blaming it on the school and not the system. And he's depending on that system to educate him. Hey. So he said he was happy at the school he was at. His grades never slipped. And he truly felt it was good going to school that was fairly new and not run down. So again, you talking about the condition of the school, you're talking about the resources. While I excelled I excelled at sports, which may have happened at the other school. So he doesn't even see that he's a walking stereotype. And, you know, this is anybody, hey Secret, this is anybody who goes to a school in a suburban district, right? You know, we're known, and there's nothing wrong with playing sports. There's nothing wrong with excelling at sports. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But when you put it in this scenario, in the big picture, you're a walking stereotype. Also, sports brings funding to schools. So you're taking your athletic talent out of the Black school and you're putting it in the white school. So there is another systemic issue. It opened my eyes and exposed me to more. So yes, you do get exposed to more on one hand, but you get exposed to less on another hand. Hey, what's up? Okay, so that was really, really deep. Okay, Tiffo Riffo says, bad. We wanted to be a part of a community that would literally kill, in all caps, for us to not be a part of it. We should have stayed separate and used our efforts to have actual equality with school fundings. We could have got our own schools. Still can, but not just schools though. Till this day, we really don't live in mixed communities. Whites are always predominant or non-existent. Hey, Dolores, Miss Reed. Okay, so Tiff did this. Like when these Snapchats came in, hey, Tamika, I didn't read them. I just saved them because I was out and about and I was working all day. Hey, Marcus, darling. Okay, so she went in. Absolutely, positively agree. So if you think about the psychology and when people of color believe subconsciously and consciously in white superiority and wanting to escape the realities that white dominance have put them in, and escaping by going towards that white dominance, trying to be in their neighborhoods, trying to be stop. Trying to be in their schools, and all the psychological damage. And I'm going to give you some examples that go along with that. She's absolutely right. It's all about equality of funding, right? But Connecticut made it so that, especially in Fairfield County and in suburban counties, that they did not have to share their vast resources with the inner city. And the way that they did that is they got rid of county government. So you know that Connecticut is divided up into counties. Okay? I live in New Haven County. Bridgeport is in Fairfield County. There's Tylen County. There's oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Okay, so there's like 7 to 10 counties in Connecticut. None of them have county governments, right? Because those county governments will be the governments that will collect the taxes. And therefore, they will have to disperse those taxes evenly throughout the communities, right? And so that's how Bridgeport would get equal funding, higher funding, if the county of Fairfield controlled the education system. But because they shut that down and they lobbied for that shutdown so that the wealthy did not have to share their resources with the poor, the incoming people of color that were coming into the cities. And then they kept the resources that they stole from the city. Do you see how crazy this is? Their communities would not be their communities today if they did not take the infrastructure from the cities, never paid the cities for the infrastructure, then cut out county governments, kept their high tax dollars within their communities, built their communities, including their schools, to be high quality, excelling schools because they had the money and the resources going into those schools for their children, and left Bridgeport. Yo, it's bonkers. So she is absolutely right. If we had an equality of resources, this is the same thing that Jason was saying. If you had equality, true equality, economic equality, resource equality, segregation, desegregation would not be the issue. Okay. Okay, to this day, we really don't live in mixed communities. Whites are always prominent or non-existent. That's a good point. Good point in terms of the neighborhood component. There are very few mixed communities in the United States. Usually, unless it's a area where gentrification is happening, and there's an influx of whites, it's usually predominantly white or they're non-existent. Good point. Oh, she did that. Kudos, Tiffo, Riffo, and Ed. They came through. Okay. Cuddy says you can make a case that it has its pros and cons, and I agree. It does have its pros and cons, but I will say there's definitely more cons. Okay, so Kush Kid Big said, when did this occur? More like systemic gentrification. And I responded, in the 1960s in the United States and the decades after in various communities in the United States. Gentrification is the opposite, in my opinion. I was really talking education, but forgot to specify. So he's basically talking about gentrification, which is the process of whites moving into urban, Black, Latino neighborhoods, buying up property for cheap. Once they move in, start to trickle in, big companies come in, and they spruce up the place. And then they raise the prices. The Blacks and Latinos and poor, any race or ethnicity, can't afford to live there. And so they have to exit. And they have to find another place to live, even if their family has lived there for decades, right? And so that's what he's speaking to. Okay, and Mikael says both, but she doesn't go into detail. And she has another question that I have to respond to. Okay, but I want to get to, Mikael, I'm going to get to that. Okay, so I'm going to get to the Facebook commentary. Okay, Van on Facebook says, how would you classify people of color who got out of poorer, minority-dominant neighborhood via going to a better school via desegregation and moved into a wealthier, white-dominated neighborhood in the suburbs because they got a good job? That would seem to be better than the suburban community. But that's one less success story in the old community, because each family does what they think is best for their family when it comes down to it. He also added, if you only take a snapshot of before, stop. I'm not talking to you. Go. If you only take a snapshot of before and after desegregation, you might not see a benefit at all, but you would miss people who climbed up the ladder. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's break this down. So this coincides with Ed's response, right? And so there is this premise, the George and Wheezy premise, Jefferson's, that you're moving on up once you get a certain economic brackets, right? And that speaks to the mentality. Now, Van is not Black or Latino. He is a white male. I don't know how he identifies, but I see him as a white male. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Went to school with him. So this is the mentality that moving to the white neighborhood, hey love, is moving up the ladder. What do people have to deal with Okay, so I'm going to break it down for you. So Little Pearl Education Group is named after my old neighborhood. Black working class neighborhood on the north side of Waterbury. Okay. And in this neighborhood, we had vast majority. I can not remember any single mother homes. Hey, Jesse. 2-parent homes, 2-parent income, working class. A lot of their children went off to college. Many of them owned, and then the people who were renting, many of them rented from family who owned property. Hey, Tuna. And so my parents, being factory workers, working overtime, got into a particular bracket in order to be able to afford a nice house. And so them coming from the South and them, hey, Joe, them being new to the North and seeing those neighborhoods that coincided with the nice neighborhoods that you see on television. Okay, so I'm getting back to that. Training your subconscious, the media being involved, schools being involved, and neither one of them graduated high school, right? Moving to the other side of historic Fulton Park, to the white neighborhood. It was just a park that separated us, right? And so, but what they did not understand is what the children have to deal with. My parents had no friends in that neighborhood. We had neighbors that we said hi. Oops, Facebook is gone. Oh, shoot. Okay, so I'm just going to have to upload this to Facebook. Oh, man. Hi, Tiger. So I'm going to have to put the YouTube one on Facebook. Oh, my bad. I saw the thing. I saw the whatchamacallit. I feel bad. So, at any rate, my parents had no friends in that neighborhood, right? Their friends remained, wherever our family was, whatever, neighborhoods their friends lived in. But they were friends of color, right? And the children, my sister trying to make friends with girls her age in the neighborhood, the Angicolas and the La Chapelles, didn't fit in. She was in high school at the time. Or middle school or high school? High school. Didn't fit in. Did not fit in. And then me being much younger, I did play with the kids in the neighborhood, but there were a lot of families who had one income households. So the mothers were stay-at-home moms, right? Where my parents had to work in order for us to both of them, in order to afford to live there. So there was already a different dynamic that was there, that was evident, right? And so there was a family who had a home in Block Island. And I witnessed the parents offer other kids in the neighborhood a summer with them on the island. I never did, right? And so in a child's mind, how does that train you to think about yourself and the social political dynamics of race within the neighborhood, right? And like, you just know that you're different, and it helps to inform you. And I want to actually find this post from Facebook that actually eloquently thinking about this. Hold on. Oh, I just saw a man kiss a horse and the horse kiss him back. Funny. Okay, don't mind me. She has so many interesting posts. I'm actually looking. Okay, I'm about to read this. I am about to read this. Okay, so Hoodoo Huzzy on Facebook says, there's a whole subset generation of Black folks who have psychological, emotional, and spiritual trauma from growing up in predominantly white neighborhoods. The legacy of integration. Their parents thought they were moving up by settling down in a nice area, but the children had to grow up not seeing regular reflections of themselves, as well as suffer through racism and microaggressions from adults and their peers. Outside of their parents, all of their authority figures were white. I've met so many Black women who have told me how ugly they thought they were growing up. Why? Because they were immersed in white beauty ideas in their day-to-day lives. They were the Black friend. Their very existence was an antithesis to what was held up as desirable. Imagine having the seed planted in your mind and heart at the age of 3. Parents really don't understand what their kids are going through because they themselves grew up in all Black environments. Also, some parents see any critique on how they raise them as being ungrateful. I usually see people who have suffered this trauma follow 2 paths. 1, they stick to environments where they are in the minority, suppress the pain and cultural isolation that they have suffered, and lament the fact that they don't fit in with other Black people. Steeped in anti-Blackness because it justifies their belief system and self-imposed alienation. They run towards Blackness as young adults. And okay, so this is 2. This is the other path that she sees. They run towards Blackness as young adults and sometimes becomes the one shouting their identity the loudest. Sometimes they can become overzealous, pendulum swinging all the way to the other side. Many will choose to move to predominantly Black areas or go to the HBCU because being in community is healing. It really hurts me to see adults walking around with these scars from childhood. Time absolutely does not heal all wounds. The pain stays unless we actively engage in the healing process. So didn't I say that about Ed's response? Definitely. So where am I? I'm going the other way. I didn't go to an HBCU. I always wanted to. When I moved to West Haven, I wanted to move to the Fairfax area. And that's predominantly Black. Only reason I did it because the school there was horrible. My son went his first year when we moved here there, and I had so many problems. So I went to, it was actually a mixed neighborhood, but my street was predominantly white, and I had to go to that school. That school was mixed because the neighborhood was mixed. So I bought my house specifically because of that principle, and I'll get into that story during another live. Because he had a major influence and impact on how I see leadership within education. right? So I had to read that because that really speaks to the assumption of moving on up, right? So for decades, Black intellectuals, Black professionals, Black workers, they all lived within the same communities. Ain't nobody getting a good job. There were already great jobs that existed. And now because of the advancements in technology, yeah, there's more jobs that we have access to. And so you have everyday workers who can afford a higher price range for a home. But you're building up another community and not the one that you came from, and those monies escape. And then you expose your children to a lesser education. So think about it. I should probably do a part 2. Yeah, I'm going to do a part 2 for this, right? And in part 2, because, you know, Facebook is not here. Part 2, I am going to give you hardcore examples in school that demonstrates how desegregation has been absolutely positively harmful to children of color. All right, so this is Randa. I'm out. I'll see y'all later. Bye. Okay, I'm gonna end